Zektar sat in the detention cell aboard the human vessel New Horizon, watching Captain Jake Morrison work at his command console. The human captain had survived the destruction of his original ship by escaping in a damaged shuttle, and had spent the past 2 years building a new vessel with the same name as the one the Velkari had destroyed. Dr. Emma Watson entered the cell carrying a data tablet and wearing the blue uniform of the Human Defense Coalition Science Division. She was a xenobiologist who had been assigned to study captured Velkari specimens, but seemed more interested in explaining human behavior to her prisoners than learning about her captives. "You still do not understand what you were fighting," Watson said as she activated her tablet and pulled up historical records. "Your tactical reports describe humans as if we were just another species with unusual military capabilities. But we are not just another species, and this was not just another war." Zektar's compound eyes focused on the data streaming across Watson's screen. The information showed human conflicts dating back thousands of years before they ever left their homeworld. Wars between human tribes, nations, and empires that had raged across their planet for millennia, with casualty numbers that shocked him even after witnessing the current conflict. Professor George Miller joined Watson in the cell carrying additional historical records. The elderly human scholar had spent his career studying what he called military anthropology, and seemed eager to share his knowledge with a Velkari audience. "Humans have been perfecting the art of warfare against their own species for over 5,000 years, Miller explained while displaying tactical manuals and strategic theories developed by human military leaders throughout their history. "We have fought every type of war imaginable using every weapon we could create or imagine." The record showed conflicts that dwarfed anything in Velkari military experience. Human wars that killed millions of their own people while they developed. Concepts like total war, strategic bombing, guerrilla tactics, and combined arms operations. They had tested every military theory against opponents who thought exactly like them, and learned from victories and defeats in ways that shaped their entire civilization. Captain Lisa Grant commanded Morrison's rebuilt vessel with the same determination she had shown during the first encounter with the Velkari fleet. She joined the conversation while reviewing tactical reports from battles across the galaxy, treating each engagement as a case study in military effectiveness, rather than simply celebrating victories or mourning defeats. "We survived ice ages that lasted thousands of years," Grant explained while showing Zektar environmental data from human prehistory. "We survived plagues that killed half our population. We survived wars where we used weapons powerful enough to destroy our entire civilization. Every disaster made the survivors stronger and taught us better ways to deal with the next crisis." Watson pulled up genetic studies showing how human populations had adapted to environmental pressures over tens of thousands of years. Zektar studied the data and realized that humanity had been shaped by constant adversity in ways that went beyond simple military preparation. Their entire species had evolved to treat survival challenges as opportunities for improvement rather than threats to be endured. Morrison's tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Rick Taylor, demonstrated how humans approached battle planning by walking Zektar through the defensive strategy for Earth. Every position had been designed with multiple fallback options. Every weapon system had been built with redundant capabilities. Every defensive formation included provisions for continuing the fight, even after suffering catastrophic losses. "We do not plan to win battles," Taylor explained while highlighting the complex logistics networks that supported human military operations. "We plan to keep learning from battles until we become impossible to defeat." Dr. Amy Ross ran the medical facilities aboard Morrison's ship and had treated both human and Velkari casualties with the same professional competence. She showed Zektar how human medical personnel approached battlefield injuries, not just as problems to be solved, but as opportunities to develop better treatment protocols for future conflicts. "Every wound teaches us something," Ross said while reviewing casualty reports from the war. "Every death provides data that helps us save more lives next time. We do not just heal our people, we use their suffering to become better at preventing suffering." The medical records demonstrated something that Zektar found deeply disturbing. Humans studied their own casualties with the same analytical rigor they applied to enemy weaknesses. They treated their losses as research data that could be used to improve their survival rates in subsequent battles. Corpsman Frank Lee had served as a field medic during some of the war's bloodiest ground engagements. His treatment protocols had been developed through trial and error during actual combat situations, where mistakes meant human soldiers died. But Lee had not just tried to save lives. He had systematically tested different medical techniques under battlefield conditions and shared his findings with medical personnel throughout human space. "We learn from everything," Lee explained while demonstrating medical equipment that had been improved based on battlefield experience. "Pain teaches us how to avoid pain. Death teaches us how to prevent death. We get stronger by understanding what makes us weak." Watson showed Zektar historical records of how humans had responded to previous existential threats throughout their development. Every challenge had led to innovations that made them more capable of surviving similar challenges in the future. Every disaster had become education that helped them deal with worse disasters more effectively. The concept that Zektar found most alien was humanity's approach to failure and defeat. Velkari military doctrine focused on avoiding losses and achieving victory through superior strength. Human military thinking seemed to embrace casualties and defeats as necessary steps toward ultimate victory through accumulated knowledge. Professor Miller explained how human military theorists had developed concepts like strategic depth, acceptable losses, and Pyrrhic victory. They planned operations knowing that people would die and equipment would be lost, but they designed those operations to ensure that losses would teach lessons that prevented worse losses in the future. Morrison joined the group as his ship approached the Sol system, where reconstruction efforts were already underway on worlds that had been damaged during the war. The human captain reviewed reports from across their territory, showing how quickly civilian populations were returning to normal activities while simultaneously improving their defensive preparations for future conflicts. "This was not our first war, and it will not be our last," Morrison said while studying intelligence reports about other galactic civilizations that might pose future threats. "Every species we meet will teach us something about warfare. Every conflict will make us more capable of surviving the next conflict. We do not fight to win wars. We fight to become impossible to defeat." Zektar completed his final intelligence report as Morrison's ship entered Earth orbit. His analysis contained warnings that he knew most Velkari leaders would find difficult to accept. The Empire had not been defeated by superior technology or greater numbers. They had been defeated by a species that treated warfare itself as a form of evolution. The humans had used the Velkari invasion as an opportunity to advance their military capabilities by several centuries in just 2 years. They had learned to build better weapons, develop better tactics, and organize better logistics by fighting against an enemy that had initially been far superior to them in every measurable category. Most disturbing was Zektar's conclusion that humanity would have eventually developed all of these capabilities on their own, even without the Velkari invasion. The war had simply accelerated a process that was already built into human civilization. They were a species that became stronger through adversity, smarter through conflict, and more united through shared struggle. As Zektar transmitted his final report to the remnants of the Velkari Empire, he included a warning that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The galaxy now contained a species that viewed every threat as education, every defeat as improvement, and every war as preparation for the next war. Humanity had not just survived their attempt at conquest, they had used it to become something that no existing galactic power would be capable of conquering. He had seen humanity bleed in ways that should have broken them. Instead, their blood had only made them stronger, and their wounds had only taught them new ways to survive. The Velkari Empire had created an enemy that would grow more dangerous with every conflict they faced, and more united with every challenge. They survived. In trying to conquer humanity, they had forged something magnificent and terrible that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy for generations to come. 2 years after the destruction of Series 7, Zektar stood on the bridge of the World Render as the combined might of the Velkari Empire's fleet approached the human home system. Over 300 warships, including 12 dreadnoughts, surrounded the small blue and green world that humans called Earth. Admiral Tosek had assembled the largest invasion force in Valkyrie history to end the human problem once and for all. The planet below should have been defenseless. Valkyrie forces had conquered or destroyed most human colonies throughout the galaxy. Millions of humans had died and dozens of their worlds had fallen. Any rational species would have surrendered months ago rather than watch their homeworld face the same destruction that had befallen their settlements. Instead, Admiral Robert Kane waited for them with a human defense fleet that numbered fewer than 80 ships. His flagship, Indomitable, led a collection of vessels that looked like they had been cobbled together from spare parts and salvaged materials. Captain Nicole Parker's fighter squadrons flew ships that appeared to be modified civilian craft armed with improvised weapons. Commander Stephen Lee coordinated planetary defenses from a space station that humans had built in the shadow of their moon. His defensive positions looked inadequate to stop even a minor Valkyrie assault force, much less the massive armada that now surrounded their world. Zektar analyzed the tactical situation and confirmed what every Valkyrie officer could see. Humans were outnumbered 4-1 and outgunned by an even wider margin. Their technology remained primitive compared to Valkyrie standards, and their defensive formations showed gaps that could be exploited easily. The battle for Earth should have been over in hours. Admiral Thosek opened communications with the human fleet and demanded immediate, unconditional surrender. Kane's response came back without hesitation or diplomatic delay. The human admiral simply said that the Valkyrie could try to take Earth if they thought they were strong enough. Then he closed the communication channel and ordered his ships into battle formation. The first exchange of weapons fire confirmed everything that Valkyrie intelligence had predicted. Human plasma cannons were weaker than Valkyrie equivalents. Human shield systems failed under concentrated bombardment. Human ships took heavy damage and began dying under the overwhelming firepower of the Imperial fleet. But then something happened that Zektar had not seen in any of his tactical projections. The humans began fighting back with weapons and tactics that should not have existed in their technology base. Captain Nicole Parker's fighters launched missiles that moved faster than anything in the Valkyrie weapons catalog. The warheads penetrated Valkyrie shields and armor with efficiency that matched Imperial military hardware. When Zektar analyzed the weapon signatures, he discovered something that made his hands tremble on his control console. The humans had reverse-engineered every piece of Valkyrie technology they had captured during 2 years of warfare. But they had not simply copied Imperial designs. They had improved them, refined them, and mass-produced them using industrial capacity that dwarfed anything the Valkyrie Empire could bring to bear. Commander Stephen Lee's defensive installations revealed themselves to be far more than the primitive weapon platforms they had appeared. Hidden weapon systems emerged from asteroid camouflage and moon-based installations. Defense satellites that had looked like communication relays opened to reveal missile launchers loaded with improved versions of Valkyrie's own torpedo designs. Engineer Chief Tony Rodriguez had spent 2 years leading human technical teams in a project that Zektar was only beginning to understand. The humans had not just been fighting a defensive war, they had been conducting the largest military research and development program in galactic history, while simultaneously fighting for their species' survival. Every Valkyrie weapon captured in battle had been studied, analyzed, and reproduced in human factories that operated at triple shifts around the clock. Every tactical system had been reverse-engineered and improved by human engineers who approached technology with a creativity that Valkyrie designers had never possessed. But most disturbing was the realization that the humans had been holding back. For 2 years they had fought with inferior weapons and primitive tactics while secretly developing the capability to match Valkyrie technology. They had accepted terrible casualties and lost entire worlds while building the industrial and technological foundation needed to win the war. The battle turned when civilian freighter Captain Mary Collins led a fleet of converted cargo ships in what appeared to be a desperate suicide attack against the world render. Zektar watched dozens of human civilian vessels accelerate toward the Imperial flagship, with their cargo bays modified to carry massive explosive charges. Admiral Thosek ordered defensive fire against the approaching freighters, and Zektar coordinated the response from his tactical station. The converted cargo ships should have been destroyed easily by the Dreadnought's point defense systems, Instead, they flew through Velkari defensive fire as if they knew exactly where every shot would be aimed. Collins had spent months studying recordings of Velkari defensive tactics from previous battles. Her pilots knew the timing patterns of Imperial weapon systems, the targeting preferences of Velkari gunners, and the blind spots in dreadnought defensive coverage. They flew their improvised attack ships through gaps in the defensive fire with precision that veteran Velkari pilots would have found impossible to achieve. The freighter attack crippled the World Render's main weapon systems and destroyed 2 of its shield generators. But more importantly, it demonstrated something that shattered Velkari confidence throughout the Imperial fleet. The humans had learned how to neutralize every advantage that Velkari technology and training had provided. Lieutenant Commander Jack Bennett transmitted detailed tactical analysis to every human ship in the battle zone as the engagement continued. His data included real-time assessments of Velkari weapon effectiveness, shield status updates on Imperial ships, and targeting recommendations based on observed Velkari vulnerabilities. The humans were fighting the Battle of Earth as if they had been planning it for decades rather than years. Every move seemed calculated to exploit specific weaknesses in Velkari equipment and doctrine. Every human casualty generated information that immediately improved the effectiveness of surviving human forces. Admiral Kane's flagship, Indomitable, led a coordinated assault against the Imperial command ships that demonstrated tactical innovation beyond anything in Zektar's experience. Human vessels moved in formations that maximized their firepower while minimizing their exposure to Velkari weapons. They concentrated their attacks on precisely the right targets to achieve maximum disruption of Imperial fleet coordination. Captain Lisa Martin commanded a squadron of heavy cruisers that had been built in human shipyards using plans derived from captured Velkari vessels. Her ships looked human, but fought with the firepower and defensive capability of Imperial warships. When Martin's squadron engaged a Velkari battlegroup of equivalent size, the Imperial ships found themselves outmatched by their own technology in human hands. Zektar realized with growing horror that the Velkari Empire had spent 2 years teaching humanity how to build weapons, conduct warfare, and organize military operations on a galactic scale. Every battle had been a training exercise. Every defeat had been education. Every human casualty had purchased knowledge that was now being used to destroy the fleet that had conquered 17 star systems. As the battle raged around Earth, Zektar watched his superior fleet being systematically dismantled by human forces that had learned to fight using Velkari methods, but with human innovations that made those methods more effective. The Empire's greatest strength had become humanity's greatest weapon, and the Velkari were losing a battle fought with their own technology in the hands of a species that improved everything they touched. The humans had not just survived the Velkari invasion. They had evolved through it into something more dangerous than the Empire that had tried to conquer them. Zektar landed on Haven 3 with the Velkari invasion force expecting to witness the final conquest of another human colony world. Admiral Thosek had selected this planet because it housed only 2 million civilians with minimal military defenses. Intelligence reports indicated it would fall within 6 days and serve as an example to other human settlements of what resistance would cost them. Commander Alex Griffin met the Velkari ground forces with something that defied every tactical manual in the Empire's military archives. The humans had not built traditional defensive positions around their cities and military bases. Instead, they had turned every single settlement, every building, every street into a fortress that could hold and fight independently. The first Velkari assault troops landed expecting to face human soldiers in uniform carrying standard weapons. What they found was something completely different. Shop owners fought from their stores with improvised explosives hidden in everyday products. Children carried messages between resistance cells, while elderly humans operated communication networks from their homes. Zektar accompanied Colonel Morthek's battalion as they attempted to secure the main city of New Haven. What should have been a simple occupation became a nightmare of urban warfare, where every civilian was a potential combatant and every building was a potential death trap. Dr. Helen Murphy ran the city's main hospital, which should have been a neutral zone, according to galactic warfare conventions. Instead, Zektar discovered that the medical facility served as a coordination center for the entire resistance network. Murphy treated wounded Velkari prisoners with professional medical care, while simultaneously using her hospital's communication systems to direct guerrilla attacks against Velkari supply convoys. When Colonel Morthek demanded that she surrender her medical supplies and patient records, Murphy responded by expanding her treatment of Velkari wounded while increasing the effectiveness of human resistance operations. She seemed to view helping enemy soldiers and fighting against enemy forces as completely compatible activities. The humans had weaponized their own medical knowledge. They studied every Velkari injury pattern and used that information to design better attacks against Velkari weak points. They analyzed the effects of their improvised weapons on Velkari biology and shared those findings with resistance cells across the planet. Private Jake Collins was a 17-year-old human who had been working in a machine shop when the invasion began. Zektar watched him fight with a wound in his shoulder that should have sent him to a medical facility. Instead, Collins continued carrying ammunition to defensive positions while blood soaked through his clothing. But the young human did not simply endure his injury and keep fighting. He adapted his carrying technique to work with his wounded arm, developed new ways to move through the rubble-filled streets, and taught other wounded humans how to remain effective despite their injuries. Pain seemed to make him more resourceful, rather than less capable. Sergeant Lisa Young led a group of civilian volunteers in hit-and-run attacks against Velkari patrols. Her team included a school teacher named Robert Garcia, a mechanic called Tony Lewis, and a restaurant owner named Carol Scott. None of them had military training before the invasion, but they learned combat techniques with terrifying speed. Zektar observed their attacks and realized that the humans were not just fighting. They were studying their enemies during every engagement. They tested different weapons against Velkari armor, experimented with various tactics against Velkari formations, and continuously refined their approach based on battle results. When Garcia was killed in an ambush, the other humans did not retreat or show signs of demoralization. Instead, they performed what they called a tactical analysis of his death. They studied exactly how he died, what mistakes led to his death, and what changes would prevent similar deaths in the future. Then they shared those lessons with every other resistance cell on the planet. The battle for Haven 3 stretched from the predicted 6 days into 6 weeks and then 6 months. Every Velkari victory led to human adaptations that made the next victory more difficult to achieve. Every human defeat became education that prevented the same defeat from happening again. Lieutenant Commander Carl Wright coordinated planetary bomb communications from a bunker that the humans had built inside an abandoned mine shaft. His network connected every resistance cell, every civilian group, and every military unit into a single information-sharing system that operated faster than Velkari military communications. Wright's people intercepted Velkari tactical transmissions, decoded their encryption systems, and used that intelligence to stay one step ahead of every Velkari operation. But they also did something else that disturbed Zektar deeply. They broadcast their own tactical information openly, knowing that the Velkari could intercept it, because they were confident that their rate of tactical innovation exceeded the Velkari rate of tactical adaptation. Captain Nancy Parker led the last organized human military unit on Haven 3 from a mobile command center that moved constantly through the underground tunnel systems. Her soldiers included regular military personnel mixed with civilian volunteers who had learned warfare during the invasion itself. Parker's forces had been reduced from 3,000 soldiers to fewer than 400 over the course of the siege. In any normal military situation, such losses would have led to surrender or collapse of unit cohesion. Instead, Parker's remaining troops fought with effectiveness that exceeded what they had shown when the unit was at full strength. Very clear. Humans had learned to do more with less. They made every bullet count, every movement purposeful, every casualty meaningful. They treated their own deaths as final contributions to a tactical database that would help other humans win future battles. Zektar interviewed captured human prisoners and discovered something that challenged everything he thought he understood about warfare. The humans were not fighting to defend Haven 3. They were fighting to learn how to defend other worlds better. Every battle was an experiment that generated data for the protection of human settlements throughout the galaxy. Private Peter Young was 16 years old when the invasion began and 18 when Zektar met him in a prisoner detention facility. The young human had been captured after single-handedly holding a street intersection for 3 days against repeated Velkari assaults. During interrogation, Young explained his tactical thinking in terms that made Zektar's blood run cold. The boy had not been trying to win an impossible battle. He had been testing different defensive techniques to see which ones worked best against Velkari assault tactics. His capture was not a defeat, but the completion of a successful experiment that would save human lives on other worlds. When the Velkari finally conquered Haven 3, after 8 months of fighting, they controlled a planet that had been stripped of everything useful and populated by humans who had learned more about Velkari weaknesses than most Velkari soldiers knew themselves. The victory had cost more Velkari lives than the conquest of the previous 3 star systems combined. Zektar filed his report from Haven 3 with a growing sense of dread. The humans were not losing this war despite suffering terrible casualties and losing entire worlds. They were trading temporary defeats for permanent knowledge, accepting short-term losses to achieve long-term advantages, and treating every human death as tuition paid toward a military education that was making them more dangerous with every battle. The Velkari Empire was not conquering humanity. They were teaching humanity how to destroy the Velkari Empire. And the humans were learning those lessons faster than any species Zektar had ever encountered. 3 months after the destruction of Series 7, Zektar found himself reassigned to the intelligence division aboard the command ship Iron Fist. His new job was to study human military capabilities and predict their next moves. What he discovered in those first weeks of analysis made him question everything the Velkari Empire thought they knew about warfare. The humans had done something that no other species in galactic history had accomplished. In just 36 days after the attack, on their mining station, they had united their entire species under a single military command. Not just their governments or their armies, but every single human from the smallest child to the oldest elder now worked toward one goal. General Patricia Hayes commanded the Human Defense Coalition from a massive space station called Olympus, base that had appeared seemingly overnight in the asteroid belt between their 4th and 5th planets. Zektar studied the construction reports with growing unease. The humans had built this military fortress in 3 weeks using converted civilian ships and mining equipment. What should have taken years of construction had been completed faster than most species could even design such a facility. Admiral Robert Kane led their space forces from a fleet that grew larger every day as civilian vessels were converted into warships. Ground Forces Commander Colonel Danny Wright organized planetary defenses that turned entire worlds into fortress systems. Intelligence Director Dr. Amy Foster coordinated spy networks that seemed to know Velkari fleet movements before the Velkari commanders made their decisions. But what disturbed Zektar most was watching footage from human industrial worlds. Factories that had been producing consumer goods on Monday were manufacturing military equipment by Friday. Children's toy factories now built communication devices. Food processing plants had been converted to produce ammunition. Civilian transport ships were being armed with weapons that human engineers designed from scratch using salvaged Velkari technology. The speed of their transformation was beyond anything in Zektar's experience. The Velkari Empire had conquered civilizations that took decades to mobilize for war. Some never managed to coordinate their different governments and factions at all. Yet humans had accomplished total species mobilization in barely a month. Captain Maria Santos led one of the first major human counterattacks against a Velkari supply depot in the Proxima system. Zektar watched the battle recordings with his fellow intelligence officers, expecting to see primitive human tactics and desperate suicide runs. Instead, he witnessed something that made veteran Velkari strategists fall silent. Santos approached the depot with a small fleet of converted civilian ships. Her vessels looked like nothing more than armed cargo haulers and passenger liners. The depot commander, Admiral Korthak, had laughed when he saw them coming and ordered only a minimal defense force to deal with what he called human scrap metal. Lieutenant Ben Clark piloted a former passenger liner called Determination, while Sergeant Julie Torres commanded the weapons systems on a converted mining ship. Their attack formation looked chaotic and unplanned to Velkari eyes. The depot's defense coordinator predicted they would be destroyed within minutes. Instead, the humans did something unexpected. They split into multiple groups and attacked from 6 different directions simultaneously while broadcasting false sensor readings that made their 12 ships appear to be over 40 vessels. The Velkari defenders found themselves shooting at ghost targets, while real human ships slipped through their defensive perimeter. Santos had studied the depot's design from long-range reconnaissance and identified 3 critical weaknesses in its shield generators. Her ship struck those exact points with weapons that had been specifically modified to exploit Velkari energy shield frequencies. The massive facility's defenses collapsed in less than 10 minutes. But the humans did not stop with simple destruction. They captured the depot's computer systems and downloaded every piece of technical information stored in its databases. Supply schedules, fleet movements, weapon specifications, tactical doctrines, and communication codes. Then they broadcast everything across the galaxy on open frequencies. Zektar realized with horror that the humans were not just fighting a war. They were studying it. Every battle became a learning experience that made them more dangerous in the next engagement. They analyzed Velkari tactics, reversed engineered captured technology, and shared their discoveries with other human forces instantly across their entire civilization. The footage from Santos's raid showed something else that chilled Zektar to his core. When the determination took heavy damage that killed 40 crew members, the surviving humans did not retreat or show signs of breaking morale. Instead, they worked harder, fought more cleverly, and seemed to use their anger as fuel for greater efficiency. Lieutenant Clark continued piloting his damaged ship with one arm in a medical sling, while Sergeant Torres operated weapons systems, with burns across half her face. They did not just endure their injuries, they adapted to them and kept fighting as if pain made them stronger rather than weaker. The battle reports that reached Velkari High Command painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Human forces were not behaving like any enemy the Empire had faced before. They did not seem to have a breaking point where losses would force them to surrender. Instead, they appeared to become more determined and more dangerous with every casualty they suffered. Zektar compiled intelligence reports from 17 different battle zones and found the same pattern repeating everywhere. Human commanders, like Colonel Frank Miller and Captain Susan White, were developing new tactics faster than Velkari generals could counter them. Each human defeat led directly to innovations that prevented the same defeat from happening again. Dr. Amy Foster's intelligence network had somehow infiltrated Velkari communication systems and was feeding real-time battlefield information to human forces. Admiral Kane's fleet coordinators could predict Velkari ship movements with uncanny accuracy. Colonel Wright's planetary defenders always seemed to know exactly where attacks would come from. Most troubling of all was the discovery that humans were treating their own casualties as sources of tactical intelligence. They studied how their people died, what weapons killed them, and what defensive measures might have saved them. Then they shared those findings with every other human military unit immediately. Zektar's final report to Admiral Thosek contained a warning that he was not sure his commander would believe. The Velkari Empire was not fighting a typical conquest war against a primitive species. They were fighting against something that seemed to grow stronger through combat experience and more unified through shared suffering. The humans had shown no interest in negotiation or surrender even after losing millions of civilians and dozens of worlds. They were not fighting to minimize their losses or protect their territory. They appeared to be fighting to learn everything possible about Velkari capabilities, while simultaneously teaching the entire galaxy that attacking humanity carried consequences no invader could afford to pay. As Zektar filed his intelligence summary, he wondered if the Velkari Empire had accidentally started a war with a species that viewed warfare itself as education rather than destruction. If that was true, then every battle was making the humans more dangerous rather than wearing them down. And that possibility terrified him more than any enemy the Empire had ever faced. Zektar stood before the massive viewing screen of the Dreadnought world render and watched the small blue planet grow larger as they approached. His 6 arms moved across the control panel with practiced ease, while his compound eyes studied the data streaming across his displays. The Velkari Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the past 50 years, and this would be number 18. The creatures on this world called it Earth, and themselves humans. Admiral Thosek's deep voice rumbled through the bridge as he examined the tactical readings. The humans had spread across several worlds in this system, but their technology seemed primitive compared to Velkari standards. Their ships moved slowly, and their weapons appeared to be basic projectile systems mixed with some energy weapons that looked like toys next to the world render's plasma cannons. They call themselves humans, Zektar reported to the Admiral while his claws clicked against the metal console. Our scouts indicate they are mammalian bipeds with soft skin and no natural armor or weapons. Their bones break easily and they require constant temperature regulation to survive. Thosek's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among their species. Weak creatures building weak machines. This will be over quickly. The human ship that approached them was called New Horizon, according to their communications. It was barely 1/10 the size of the world render, and appeared to be some kind of research vessel rather than a military craft. Zektar could see the humans moving around inside through their transparent viewing ports. They looked even more fragile than the report suggested. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system, speaking in the common galactic trade language. His words were careful and diplomatic as he requested a meeting to discuss peaceful relations between their species. Zektar translated for the Admiral while studying the humans' facial expressions on the screen. Morrison appeared calm, but there was something in his eyes that Zektar could not quite identify. "Tell them to surrender all human territories immediately," Admiral Thosek commanded. "If they comply, we will allow them to serve the Empire as a worker class. If they refuse, we will demonstrate why resistance is pointless." Zektar relayed the message and watched Morrison's reaction. The human captain's face remained steady, but something changed in his posture. He spoke quietly to the woman beside him who appeared to be his pilot. Her name was Lisa Grant according to their intercepts, and she had the same strange look in her eyes as her captain. Morrison responded that he needed time to contact his government and discuss terms. This was standard procedure for most species when first encountering Velkari military might. Usually they begged for mercy within hours after seeing what the Empire's weapons could do to their cities. "Show them," Admiral Thosek ordered. "Target their mining station, the one with the most civilians." Zektar's hands moved across his console to lock onto Series 7, a large mining facility that housed 50,000 human workers and their families. The station rotated slowly in space, looking peaceful and completely defenseless. Through his sensors, he could detect thousands of life signs going about their daily routines, with no idea what was about to happen. The world render's main plasma cannon charged with a low humming sound that vibrated through the ship's hull. Zektar had seen this weapon destroy entire cities on other worlds. It would vaporize the mining station in seconds, leaving nothing but glowing particles and empty space. "Fire," the Admiral commanded. The beam of superheated plasma streaked across space and struck Series 7 dead center. The station's metal hull glowed white-hot for a brief moment, before the entire structure exploded in a brilliant flash of light. When the glow faded, there was nothing left except scattered debris floating in the darkness. Zektar immediately turned, his sensors toward the New Horizon to observe the human reaction. This was always his favorite part of first contact with a new species. The moment when they truly understood what they were facing, and all hope left their eyes. Usually there would be screaming or begging, or at least some kind of emotional breakdown. Instead, Jake Morrison stood perfectly still on his bridge, watching the empty space where Series 7 had been. His crew gathered around him, and Zektar could see their faces clearly through the viewing port. There was shock and grief, but underneath those emotions was something else. Something that made Zektar's chitin crawl with an unfamiliar sensation. Lisa Grant moved to her communication station and began typing rapidly. Engineer Carlos Rodriguez pulled up tactical displays showing the Velkari fleet positions. Morrison himself activated what appeared to be a general broadcast system that would reach every human ship and settlement in the system. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the New Horizon." The human's voice came through clearly on all frequencies. The alien fleet has just destroyed Series 7 with all hands. 50,000 civilians, including families and children. They demand our complete surrender and want to make us slaves. Morrison paused and looked directly at the main screen as if he could see through it to the World Render's bridge. They think we are weak because we tried diplomacy first. They think we will break because they killed our people. They want a war. The human captain's next words sent a chill down Zektar's spine that he had never felt in 30 years of conquest. Morrison's voice remained calm and controlled, but there was something underneath it that sounded like the growl of a predator. Show them what we learned from our own history. Show them what humans do when someone threatens our families. All ships receive tactical data on enemy capabilities and distribute to command. We are at war. The New Horizons engines flared to life as the small ship accelerated toward the Velkari fleet. Zektar's sensors showed that Morrison was broadcasting detailed scans of the World Render's weapons and shield configurations to every human vessel in the system. Instead of running or surrendering, the humans were preparing to fight. Admiral Thosek ordered the destruction of the New Horizon, and Zektar watched the small ship die under the concentrated fire of 6 Velkari destroyers. But even as Morrison's vessel broke apart, his final transmission continued broadcasting across human space, carrying tactical information and something else that Zektar was beginning to recognize. It was not fear or desperation in the human voices responding to Morrison's call. It was fury, cold, calculating fury that promised terrible consequences for anyone who threatened their species. As reports began coming in from across the system of human ships converging on their positions, Zektar realized that the Velkari Empire might have made a serious mistake. They had just declared war on a species that seemed to view the destruction of 50,000 civilians, not as a reason to surrender, but as a reason to fight harder.